Ellie, thank you so much for joining me on the Do Nothing podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you in person.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Before we get started, I always like to ask my guests kind of how they get going in the morning, how they get themselves set up. For me, most people who pay attention to what I'm up to know that for me in the morning, I do nothing, which is I start the morning with a meditation practice for 45 minutes. And then I go into some exercise and some reading and things of that nature. But I'm curious, what's your version of do nothing?
I mean, it's kind of pretty similar.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is meditate. I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone. And I really put my phone on airplane mode, and, maybe I get up and do a quick face wash or something just to put some time between the sleep and the practice. And then I sit usually in my bed or on the couch for somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. It's my first meditation of the day. After that, if I'm up early enough, I'll also include a workout, probably something healthy to eat. So we're in the fall season, so something warming, maybe scrambled eggs with ghee if we're getting really specific, maybe a smoothie with some sort of collagen, I don't know. And after that, after I sort of nourished, I guess, mind, body, and soul, then I head out and start my day.
How long does that routine take you?
It depends. It usually takes, if you're commuting to the gym or exercise in New York City, it can take anywhere between like 2.5 hours in the morning to 3, depending on how luxurious or indulgent I'm feeling on any given morning. And look, like some mornings don't look like that at all, right? So maybe my meditation practice is 20 minutes that morning, and I have to come to a meeting, or maybe my body's feeling sore, so I don't work out. I'm really forgiving and incredibly flexible, so I'm not super rigid. The only thing that's rigid is my meditation practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where do you go in the morning? Where's your? Do you go to one of the meditation studios? Is that where you, or do you have an office, or where do you go?
So we don't have an office yet. Mindful is still very much in startup mode, despite what it might look like on the interwebs. So we work out of one of the studios. Sometimes I have a 3 studio day, which means I'm hitting every single studio in one day. Sometimes just one studio, sometimes 2. But I spend a lot of time on the subway in between, going from this studio to that studio.
Really?
So I end up doing my second meditation on the subway at some point during the day, or I'm usually responding to emails. People say that that's like a great time to listen to a podcast, but I find I'm never quite on the subway long enough. So admittedly, I'm usually meditating or responding to emails, not really listening to podcasts.
Okay. So you can use your time efficiently on the subway here in New York.
I mean, one of my favorite ways to use that time is just to meditate. I think any seasoned practitioner or someone who's been practicing for a long time really loves the subway as a meditation spot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard about that, and I don't go on the subways really, so I don't know that world. But I've read a lot about people using subways as a time to meditate. And it's pretty amazing. Yeah. What time do you generally get up?
Let's see, this morning I was up at 6 a.m. I would say anywhere between 6 a.m. and 7:30. And on the weekends, if my husband doesn't wake me, I could probably sleep until like 8:30.
How much sleep do you need?
Well, I need about 8 hours to be like 100% friendly. But I know that that'll probably change, one day if I have little ones or something like that. I'm enjoying my 8 hours a night while I can.
Yeah, no kidding.
And while I don't have a pet, so really I can, take that extra time. But I love to sleep. I find it to be incredibly nourishing. And for me, it's sort of sleep, diet, exercise, and meditation are my 4 sort of pillars of self-care. And I think they're obvious pillars of self-care. So I love the sleep.
Growing up, you grew up in LA.
I grew up in LA.
Yeah, and I mean, could you ever have imagined you would be the CEO of a chain of meditation studios?
It's kind of crazy that they're even a chain. Like, can you consider 3 studios a chain? I feel like in New York there's some...
What do you call that?
Well, I don't know, because in New York I feel like there's some rule that if you have like 10 restaurants, then you have to post the calories of the food because that's considered a chain.
Okay.
So 3 feels like more like a little bit of a network, but
that's
maybe
fair.
It's a chain. I don't know. No, definitely not. And I think... anyone who's familiar with Mindful or our sort of inception story, I spent about 7 years working in the film business. I was a kid who grew up in LA, as you mentioned, and my family worked in the entertainment business, and they derive an enormous amount of joy from what they did, and I saw that joy every day growing up. And I sort of assumed that same joy was waiting for me in a way that I was entitled to that joy. And so I went to film school, graduated, worked here in New York for about 7 years, and I didn't like it at all. In fact, it was sort of the opposite of joy that was waiting for me. I think I felt like it was something maybe I had to do or I was meant to do.
Yeah.
And I realized that all my free time was spent in spirituality and consciousness pursuit. So if I had really been paying attention maybe 10 years ago, I probably would have said, oh, it's possible that I could own a meditation studio. But the truth is I absolutely did not see it coming.
What were you like as a kid?
That's a good question. Really joyful, and I was really actually into some weird mystical stuff. I would ask my parents to take me to like tarot card shops and crystal stores and sort of all these things that we now see are, popular in sort of wellness culture or more acceptable or whatever it is. And I was 8 years old. That was self-directed. I loved dance. That was a big thing, putting on shows, dancing. And what else? I mean, I was a vivacious, curious child. I think in the 1980s they might have called me an indigo child also, like interested in like, it seems not everybody knows what that reference is. It's almost like a reference like Age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
So maybe someone might have diagnosed me briefly as an indigo child. But I was a happy kid, and my childhood was also a little bit complicated. My parents got divorced when I was 10 years old. My mother was terminally ill. So despite all those sort of, traumatic situations that you can go through as a child, I was really loved and cared for. And I think that's why I had a wonderful childhood.
You have 2 sisters, is that correct? Okay.
I actually have 3, including
sisters.
My stepsister.
Oh, okay.
So I have 2 full sisters from my parents and a stepsister that's been with us since she was 2. So we consider her a sister.
Sure.
Yes.
And where are you in terms of...
I'm the odd middle child.
You're the middle child.
Okay. I'm the meditation studio owner, middle child. My sisters both live here in New York City, and it's been so wonderful. Yeah, wow. I always like to tell people my mom was from Florida and my dad is from New York, and I think they raised East Coast kids on the West Coast, if you can imagine that.
Sure.
So my parents always said to me, we live in Los Angeles because this is what your dad does for a living. If we didn't live there, we'd live elsewhere. And so every summer we would spend our summers in Vermont, on the East Coast in this town called Bridgewater, which probably doesn't have a population over 500, but we can Google that later.
Yeah.
And that was like a really wonderful experience. Just spending a lot of time on the East Coast. My older sister moved here first when she graduated college, and I think she's just such a shining example for my other sisters and I, so we followed suit.
What are your age differences?
So 2 years between my...
2 years, two.
No, 2 and 4.
Oh, okay.
So 2 years with my older sister, 4 years with my little sister, and our littlest sister is 4 years younger than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you said your parents got divorced when you were 10.
Yeah.
My parents got divorced when I was 8. I remember the day, like, it's
they
so ingrained in my mind. Yeah. What was your day like?
I remember, well, it's funny because when you think about memories and how the mind works, I'm pretty sure I conflate my mom telling me she was ill with my parents telling me they got a divorce. So in my mind, those memories are both correct, and I'm pretty sure they told us one thing they told us, if I'm really closing my eyes and thinking about it, I believe they told us in their bedroom about my mom being sick. And then I think they told us about their I think they told us about their divorce first. Now I don't remember. One was in the bedroom and one was in the den. But I remember being there with my sisters and it being definitely a tough thing.
It was. And so it was, in your mind, it was separate instances.
They are separate instances,
but
I think I conflate both memories.
You bring them together.
I'm not sure which one was which.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've never tried to clarify that with your sisters to see how they remember.
I could probably call it my older sister and she would know exactly which one. I'm pretty sure my mom told me about being ill in her bedroom with my father. I think they were already separated. And I think that they had told us about the separation in the den, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
So as a 10-year-old, was that the same year?
No.
No, okay, so it was a different year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think they told us about the separation when I was 10. I don't know if they're going to be like it. Well, my mom is not here anymore, bless her. But my dad, it's funny that I'm talking about this on TV, on a video. I don't think I've spoken about this in a long time, maybe even with my husband. So here you go. But I have nothing to hide, and this is my story.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Of course. So, yeah.
So what's it like? What was it like for you as a 10-year-old, trying to internalize what that message even meant? Like, what does it mean that my mom is sick? And what does it really mean that they're being divorced? I remember me thinking, okay, they said, you'll see your dad on the weekend. And, I said, okay, so now can I go play with my friends? And, I was very anxious to go do that. I just didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, I actually, weird, not to segue or go into a different category, but when I was 12 or 11 or 12, both of my grandmothers died on the same day of two totally different causes.
Wow.
And I remember that was the first time I saw my parents in a car together since they had separated, and they were coming to tell us about this. One of my dad's mom had passed away, which we were expecting, and we were calling my mom's mom, who lived in LA, to tell her, and she wasn't answering. And so someone went over there to check on her, and she unfortunately had also passed away. And I remember when they told us that, my first instinct was also to go and play with my friends. So it's fun, and surround myself with joy and being a kid. And when I think back to, having a sick parent, I think when you're little, in some ways, you think your parents are invincible. So I think I went from thinking that my mom was never going to die to then being 14 and realizing that she probably was. And that was a pretty significant journey. And she ultimately died when I was 19 years old. But in terms of having divorced parents, not to make light of it, but I grew up in LA. Like, it wasn't that odd. And so there was some aspect of it where I was like, oh, I'm like so-and-so in my class. It's not that weird. They do that too. So I definitely had that aspect of it where I knew that I wasn't alone. And actually, I just got married in August, and one of my very best friends made a speech, and she talked about how I was the other girl in class who had divorced parents and a sick mom. And that's what we bonded over at the time. And it was this special understanding between us. So I think all those things compounded at a young I think it just made me appreciate life and be more joyful overall. And I think it also made me a bit of a realist when I grew up, that, as Pema Chodron says, things come together and they fall apart. And this is part of life. So in some ways I feel lucky, because I think it prepared me for being an adult. Maybe.
Is that a feeling you have upon reflection, or did you feel that way when you were young?
I think it's hard to say. I'm sure I shed a lot of tears and was very sad and confused at first when I was maybe 10. And I think, just watching my mom deteriorate over the course of 10 years. She had multiple sclerosis first, and then she was diagnosed with brain cancer, so it was a bit of a double whammy. I think kids act out in all sorts of ways. I did all the things. Didn't call my parents, stayed out late, experimented with different things, and I was lucky I had really loving parents who knew that I was probably just going through something difficult, and they just showered me with more love and did the best they could, and I think I turned out okay.
I think you turned out okay. So when they got divorced, were you co-parented, or how did that work? Which household were you in?
Yeah, so I spent the majority of time with my mom, and I think to my father's credit, he knew that we probably had less time with her, and I think he felt it was important for us to spend that kind of time with her. And so we spent most of our time at her house, and then we would see my dad like every other weekend. And then once she passed away, we see my dad. Obviously, I don't live at home, but we see him all the time. And my little sister ended up living with him for a while because she was still in high school. My older sister and I were already in college.
I see.
Yeah.
And what was it like living with your mom and her being sick, and just what was that experience like?
Yeah.
As such a young person.
What I would say is that I think an important part of the story is to acknowledge the enormous amount of privilege that my family had, so that people were in our house all the time taking care of my mom. Like, that is not the reality of so many people out there in the world. And so, in a way, there were, towards the end, especially in the final few years, the house really felt like a hospital, especially her room. And, at one point I remember they brought in a hospital bed for her. And again, like, we are so unbelievably lucky that we were able to care for her in that way. And, I think when you're little, you don't really know the difference. And we had wonderful family and friends, and lots of people supporting us. But I think I think that that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because I don't think my experience of having a sick mom was necessarily normal because of the position we were in to be able to really care for her in that way.
That's interesting. I mean, I look at it as it was your normal.
Yeah.
You know, so
sure.
you didn't know any different.
I didn't know any different then. I mean, but now as an adult looking back, what
Sure.
an unbelievable position to be able to be in, that she was fortunate enough to be able to give herself whatever care she needed.
Yeah. But when you were growing up, how did you feel at that time, maybe not knowing this sort of, you know, it was your normal?
I gotta be honest, I have therapy at noon today after this, and my work is like gonna be done here.
That's hysterical.
It's true. It's Wednesday. I have therapy every Wednesday at noon. This is like, I mean, you might as well swap out my therapist, so I love. Actually, don't swap out for her. She's amazing. But sorry, what was the question?
I have no idea.
It was about being a kid.
No, it was about your normal and what that was like, because now as an adult you've obviously thought a bit about it and you realize what it really was.
Yeah.
But I think as kids, you know, the situation that we're in, we don't know any different. So sometimes we don't realize, in your case it was privilege, and there's a million different scenarios. So I'm just curious how you were feeling, you know, at the time. Was there resentment? Was there sadness, or probably everything?
Sadness. I mean, I remember one thing in particular was pretty difficult as a teenager, was that because of her brain cancer, her short-term memory wasn't great. So it'd be like, oh, hey, I want to go do this. Is that okay? Because she was still my parent and my guardian, so I had to ask for permission. And she'd say yes. And then I'd leave, and she'd call me angry, and not realizing she had given me permission to leave. I would say, like, when you're 15 years old and you just want to be like, oh, Mom, you know, and your mom is sick, I think it's like a different situation and incredibly frustrating. And by the way, like, our brains are wired to be adolescent until we're, I think, roughly 25 years old. So our brains are like wired for risk and acting out and striking out on our own, and that's a chemical thing that's happening in our bodies once we're, you know, once we're through puberty and we become that adolescent. And I think, you know, all the sort of normal, like, I know better than you, Mom, and like, I'm gonna go be with my friends, and like, whatever, it was a B on a test, you know, like, whatever I was like getting into like fights with her about, which I think were normal. You know, I think we bore the brunt of, you know, her own emotional body when she was sick. And I think, you know, fights, maybe the stakes were sometimes a little bit higher in a different way. But again, like, she was an incredibly loving and generous person. And I think she was just probably super pissed and upset that she was sick. Yeah.
Understandably so.
So I would say that stuff was the hardest, because she still actively parented, and then sometimes her illness would get in the way, and that was tough as a teenager.
Were your sisters feeling similar?
Oh, I can't talk about them. Their feelings on camera.
Okay, no worries.
I don't want to get into that. I love my sisters.
Guys...
I mean, yes, I think, you know, the one thing I'll say about my sisters is that my mom raised us to feel that they are the closest thing in the world to me. I'm gonna get emotional. And we're super duper. This is great TV for you. You know, we're super duper close. They're so important to me, and you know, I think that going through a loss like that, we were lucky that it further connected us. I love my sister so much. And
thank you so much for sharing this with everybody.
Yeah, of course. This is real life. You know?
It is.
You know, it sucks losing people you love, and
it does.
Yeah, actually, you know, my husband also lost his mother, and so did my older sister's husband. Also lost his mother, and we all lost our mothers young. And it's such an interesting shorthand. The reason our friends set us up was because we had both lost our moms, and they felt like that was an important thing to have in common. And yeah, I just think, I think I really appreciate my loved ones and how short life really is. So
thank you for sharing.
Of course. Yeah.
It will be well received.
Yeah. Good thing I didn't wear any makeup and forgot that we were videoing.
And your beautiful Halloween
and my beautiful earrings. Halloween earrings.
It was very strategic. I love that. So growing up in LA, having spent a little bit of time there and a little bit of time here, you know, I always wonder about the bubbles, and the bubble that you were in there. It's a beautiful part of the country, but it's so busy. And did you feel that growing up?
In LA?
Yeah.
I think when you're like a California baby, and you grow up in the kind of environment I do, or I did, you know, I think you're like, oh, it's sunshine and I don't think you like appreciate. I mean, you're a kid. You're just like, wow,
this is how it is.
It's just how it is, you know. And then when I went to Chicago for school, that was like a dramatic shift in the weather. And I remember like wearing a face mask, walking on like Lakeshore Drive to go from like North to South Campus. And I was like, what the F am I doing here? Like, and what I do notice as an adult, and I don't know if this is just anecdotal for me personally, is if the sun doesn't shine in New York. We went through a period this fall actually where it was like gray for 10 days. And I noticed I get super emotionally agitated or like a little prickly if I don't see the sun. I think I need to photosynthesize because of my origin state. But I do love the season so much, and you know, I've been in New York for 13 years, so I think I probably took the sunshine for granted. That would be my guess, because I don't think I knew any different. Where did you go to school in
Chicago?
Northwestern.
Northwestern?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fantastic.
I loved it.
How did you choose
Fantastic. I know you say it like you're from the Midwest.
Well, I have a lot of connections
that's how people say fantastic
about
Northwestern. It's a Chicago accent.
No way! I've never been called out on that.
Are you from the Midwest?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh my God.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out.
No problem.
That's like a new learning for me.
Oh, totally. That way you pronounce that A is, fantastic. It's very Chicago.
But how did you choose Northwestern?
You know, I heard that there was a school in a city that was a film school that had a campus that was adjacent to a city that also had sports, that had Greek life, and I was just like, that sounds like me, you know. So I remember I went to go visit the school, and I was like, I think I'm gonna go here, and I left, and I was like, this is like pretty much my first choice, and all the other schools were far behind. And I remember that a lot of people apply early from my high school to go there, and I was like, I'm gonna let all those people kind of like duke it out, and I'll like apply regular admission, and like just hope it works out.
Wow.
Because I felt like, you know, maybe on paper there were people similar to me applying early, and maybe if I was in a general pool, I'd have a better chance. And you know, I went to a really rigorous high school called Harvard Westlake, and I'm very lucky to have such a wonderful education. And I was just joking with Ed who was a dean when I was there, and now has some bigger important job that I don't remember the title of. He'll probably laugh if he sees this at the school. But he was in New York, and we were chatting, and I gotta be honest, like Harvard Westlake was way harder than college.
Wow.
And way harder.
Great. Because Northwestern is not an easy school.
It's not. And I remember like graduating in the middle of my class at Harvard Westlake and being like, like this was like the best I could do, and like this is fine, and whatever, I'm like definitely not that smart, and you know, these like self-deprecating things you think about yourself when you're like 17 or 18, comparing yourself to, you know, the 250 other kids in your school, whatever your insecurities are, you know, whatever that comparing mind is. And I remember waking up at Northwestern feeling like somehow I like had won the lottery, like it was a miracle that I had, you know, gotten into that school. And I woke up and I was like, I think I'm gonna try really hard, and I think I'm gonna like you know, bring my A game. And what I realized is that and it wasn't that I didn't try in high school. I was into like my extracurricular activities like dance and peer support, which honestly, if we're talking about meditation studios down the road, I was in like a peer support, peer advisory program where people would get together and talk about their problems and what they were feeling as teenagers, and I was like a peer support leader. So going back, I guess like that's a thread line through to the meditation, sort of group meditation and safe supportive spaces thing. But I woke up and I said, I feel really lucky to be here, and I'm not going to squander this opportunity, you know, to be at such a wonderful school. And I ended up graduating and speaking at my graduation. And that was just like a crazy trajectory, because I think because Harvard Westlake was so rigorous, even though I loved going there, I don't think I realized, what kind of student I could be, because I was always looking at students who were better than me. But yeah, if they really prepared me for college, I mean, they did exactly what they needed to do.
And obviously, even being at the midpoint in your class of 250, that was a good enough grades and whatnot to get yourself to Northwestern.
Well, I applied to film school, so it wasn't like they were evaluating me on my math.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Fair
because
enough.
if they had been, I probably would not have gotten it.
Okay.
But because I was going to something creative, I think, I don't know what goes into their decision making, but I would imagine that it didn't really matter that, my math scores weren't as high as, let's say, other
That's
things
understandable.
I was interested in.
And when you say you woke up and you started to really appreciate where you were at, is that in the literal sense, or was there...
I literally remember waking up the first day in my freshman dorm room, staring at the ceiling. I remember my bed, I remember the room number, I remember the whole thing. And I was like, okay, I better do something with this good fortune. And what happens if I really push myself? And in a way that is and it wasn't that I didn't push myself at Harvard Westlake, because I did, but no matter how far I pushed myself, there were kids who were just unbelievably brilliant at that school and talented, and all the things that sort of go into going to a school like that. And I think I woke up at Northwestern, I was like, there are so many more kids in the class, and I feel like I can really carve out something on my own and really figure out who I want to be and how I want to work and what I want to do in this world. And it was awesome.
How did you become a leader of this group that you were referencing?
In Harvard Westlake? I think you just...
No, didn't you say in college at Northwestern?
No, that was at Harvard Westlake. Peer
I'm
support.
sorry.
Yeah, you just signed up on a sign-up sheet.
Okay. So you were already helping.
I don't remember the exact particulars of it. But
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And so were you excited about film and all what you were studying while you were there?
Totally.
You were psyched.
Yeah, I was psyched. And maybe, psyched in that sort of... I know everything. I'm 18 years old. I'm from LA. Psyched kind of way. This is great. I'm going to move back.
Roadmap. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm going to move back. And what's so interesting is that I often tell this joke, which is that I always knew that I wanted to run a studio. I just got my M's really confused. I thought it was going to be a movie studio. And so there was this woman who went to Northwestern and who was, I think, the first female president of Paramount Studios, and her name is Sherry Lansing. And I was like, I want to be like Sherry Lansing. That's who I'm going to be. And I just didn't have the
internal drive
the passion. I think to really make a go at it in the film business, to stick it out, to be there, to do it. I think you really have to love it, it's a calling and it's meant for you, and that this is the way you want to contribute by telling stories, and this is what you want to do. And I just didn't love it in that way. I love something else so much more than
When
that.
did you start to realize that?
I would say in 2008, I had a little bit of a health scare, which landed me in the office of Dr. Frank Littman, who's a functional medicine doctor here in the city.
Here in New York.
Yeah. And I love him.
Be Well? Is
that a book?
Exactly.
Yeah. And
it's a great book.
Yeah.
I love that book.
Yeah, he's super cool. He has a lot of books, maybe 4 or 5, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But he's great, and he was helping me solve sort of the more physical aspects of my little health situation, but I think there was an emotional piece that also needed healing, and we could go all the way back to being 10 and this sort of trauma that you go through when your parents are separating and your mom is super sick and then your mom dies and all that stuff. And so he was like, I think there's an emotional piece that's missing. And so I started to go out and look into ways to try and heal that piece, and that led me to a series of masters and teachers and healers. And before I knew it, I was just you loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And I loved peeling away the layers of my own consciousness, figuring out how my trauma was informing the way I was acting or the way I was feeling in my physical body. I loved learning about the breath and its capacity to support the body, heal the body, bring the body into the present moment. I first started practicing something called ecstatic breath work, which is this really dynamic breath technique, which isn't meditation. It's just a type of breath work. And I noticed that it was having a profound effect on my relaxation and my mood. But I also realized that it was this event piece that I would do for a few hours. Or I wouldn't want to drive a car after or send an email. And so I was like, I need something more flex for my everyday life, which is how I ended up picking up meditation and sort of struggling on and off with it. But I loved this, this idea doing whatever you can, if you have the access to do so, to heal yourself. And that's what started the journey.
Were you in New York at the time when you were in the film business? So you actually came here to New York.
I came here, yeah.
Oh, and didn't go to LA.
No.
What were you doing? What kind of jobs?
Yeah, so my first job was in the William Morris mailroom. So I delivered mail, which is a pretty standard entree into the business.
Yep.
And in a really bizarre, small world story, I went to Israel on Birthright when I was in my final semester of my senior year, which is an organization that sends Jewish kids and people with Jewish parents.
Jewish Federation?
I forget who is the parent organization. I think probably. I don't know, actually. I should know. That's not good that I don't know.
I think it's Jewish.
I think so. Yeah. But anyways, they send you to Israel to just hear the story about your religion or culture, however someone defines it. Yeah. And while I was there, they always assign a few soldiers from the IDF to your trip as like, here are people that are your age that are serving the army. This is what it's like, because after high school you have to go right into the army. It's mandated. And so I became friends with one of the soldiers on my trip, and he's like, oh yeah, my cousin is like a big shot in film in New York, and she's out there, and I was thinking to myself, like, I'm from LA, like, what are the chances that you're like, what's up, like, so it's totally 17, 18, or no, I'm sorry, 21. I was so obnoxious in 21, and I was like, yeah, whatever. We became friends, and it was actually, wow, okay, so it's 2018, so exactly 12 years ago today, Halloween. Oh, wow. This is bizarre. I was delivering mail to one of the routes, which had the only film agent in the New York office on that route, and it was Halloween, and this little girl was walking out, and she was like dressed up, and I had candy in my cart because it was Halloween. This is bizarre that this is exactly 12 years ago, and I'm telling you the story today. And I like, everyone always wanted that route because it was like the one opportunity to interact with the one person who was in the New York office, the literary agent. So I got it, and the little girl walked out, and I was like, oh, do you want a piece of candy? And then her mom walked out, who was the agent, and she was like, hi, whatever. And then I ended up like pushing my mail cart more and delivering my mail. And then that weekend I got a random email from this soldier in Israel, and he was like, I have a new baby cousin who was just born in New York. You have a new neighbor. Look at how cute they are, like just keeping in touch. And I opened up the photo, and it was the little girl in the office holding this baby in the photo. And I was like, oh my God. And I like immediately emailed him back, and I was like, is this little girl's name Natasha, and is her mother Leora? And he was like, yes. How do you know them? And I was like, she works in my office. I want to work for her. And so the next day I took my little mail cart, so whatever, tomorrow is November 1st. Yep. I got the same route, and I stopped at the desk of, this is where it gets really interesting, Sarah Riggs Amico, who is now running for lieutenant governor with Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor in Georgia. Everyone go out and vote. Okay, I don't know, this is going to be after maybe, but and they're running for so lieutenant governor and governor. Anyways, Sarah Riggs Amico was the assistant working for Leora at the time. And I stopped my cart, and Sarah was brilliant, and she had graduated from Harvard Business School, and she's a super impressive human being. And I was like, this, living up to her would be like crazy. But I stopped my cart, and I was like, hi, I said, I'm Ellie Burrows, and I know one of Leora's, cousins super well. He's a friend of mine, and she was like, she literally stopped and goes, family is the most important thing to Leora. Hold on 1 second, she'll be right off her call. So sorry, this is a really long story, but she pulls me into, so Sarah goes in, Leora gets off her call, and she invites me into her office. And she was like, so you know Yoni Block? And I was like, I do. She's like, how do you know him? And I was like, I was just, in May, I was on Birthright. I met him. We've stayed in touch. We're good friends. And she was like, are you looking to get out of the mailroom? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, you're hired. And she was like, we're going to have to, and she was like, family's the most important thing to me. You're friends with Yoni. That's good enough for me. And she was like, we're going to have to make it look like a normal interview process, just so you know. But like, if you want the job, it's yours. Sarah's going to be leaving. And it was like that. And that was 4 weeks in the mailroom. And that was like bananas, just small worlds colliding. And anyway,
at the right time.
At the right time. I mean, the whole thing is so crazy, and exactly 12 years ago today. But anyway, so I worked for Leora for a year, and she ended up leaving to focus on raising her family. And I left, but I left before she left to go work for Ted Hope, who is now the head of Amazon Studios. But at the time, Ted is sort of like one of the fathers of independent filmmaking in New York City, and I worked for him for 2.5 years during the recession, which is an interesting time to be working in independent film because I don't think we really made a movie. I came on the tail end of a film called Adventureland, and he was kind enough to give me an assistant to Ted Hope credit. But I adore Ted, and that was a tough couple years that I worked for him.
Oh, really?
Mostly just because of the economic climate, and but I learned so much from him. And funny story is Ted wrote a book, and I mentioned in it because I told him what Facebook was. So that just like dates where we are in the great story of like our social media universe. He didn't know what Facebook was, and I was like, this is what it is, and let me show you how it works. And I think Northwestern was like in the first 20 schools to be on it. Yeah. But already it was like I'd been running for a few years. So and then I quit my job with Ted because I had that health scare during that time, and ended up studying with a healer, shaman type for a year, who was based in LA. And during that process of healing, again, an important part to mention of my story when people listen is just how privileged I was to be able to make these kinds of decisions. My mom had passed away, and I had an ability to spend a year off from work. And I spent that year basically working as an assistant and a house sitter and an apprentice to this man and his wife.
In LA?
Yeah, in LA and in New York. And then after that, I got a phone call from a friend I was in elementary school with, who was working at a film company in New York, who called me up one day and said, hey, there's a job open at Cinematica Media. It's an executive position to track the films that are going into film festivals. You want to come back? And I was like, okay, I'll go and make my peace with it. So I came back and worked in financing and sales at a film financing and sales firm for about 2 years. And it was during that job that I would come into my staff meetings, and I would listen to the way my one colleague, I had more than one colleague, but one colleague in particular, Dana O'Keefe, talk about how passionate he was about filmmaking and who was making what film. And he would walk in with this fervor and this passion. I was so envious, and I would say to myself, I want to feel that way about what I do. And I don't feel that way now.
You weren't feeling that.
No.
What about when you were 4 years an assistant for, and I forgot her name already.
So I was 1 year an assistant for Leora.
1 year.
1 year.
Okay.
It was fast.
Okay.
Then I went to work for Ted Hope for 2 years.
Okay.
2 and a change. Took 1 year off, and then came back to the film business for about 2.5 years.
What did you learn in those 3 years? One with Leora, did I say that right?
Yeah.
And then two with
Ted.
Ted.
And then with I also worked for John Sloss and a man named Bart Walker. If we're getting really specific around who I worked for.
Just business wise, because now you're a business person.
Yeah, so I would say that the skills I learned as an assistant, as an administrative assistant to these smart and talented individuals, are probably the skills I use most as a entrepreneur. How to write an email, how to talk to people, how to manage people, how to schedule things properly. I mean, the real sort of nuts and bolts. I would say, what kind of leader I want to be, in terms of, how I want to empower my staff and work with them and lead by example, and understanding, that in the film business, it can be a very toxic work environment, just absolute burnout. Sometimes I imagine that's what lawyers feel like. And so, just making sure there is some sort of work-life balance at the company. And look, we're still a startup, but every single person who works at the studio is a meditator. And I think to have a bunch of meditators working together, you get a sort of different kind of alchemy, I guess you could say, when it comes to a work environment. So I would say those sort of administrative skills, business skills, all of that was picked up. But the administrative stuff is probably the most major. How to, make a phone call and ask for something, how to pitch something, how to, craft an idea, how to, ask for something when you're intimidated.
Did those things come naturally to you, or were you kind of outside your comfort zone but in it, so you were really learning, taking it on, or was it I got that, and then it felt very natural?
Look, I think I think there's always a period of time when you start a new job that's like a 3-month adjustment period.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say for the first 3 months of working for any person, it was just like learning the ropes and feeling super insecure and making a lot of mistakes and like hopefully, you know, fixing those mistakes before anyone found out about them.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember the biggest mistake I made at William Morris was I was scheduling a meeting for an actor, and he lives outside of the city, and he drove in, and the person I'd scheduled a meeting with was in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And I had confirmed the meeting, but I had left a message. I never actually spoke to anybody, but I covered that up, and, you know, and dealt with it very skillfully. And I would say that part was instinctual.
Oh, wow.
But the part that, you know, just crossing my T's, dotting my I's, that was the stuff I needed to learn about more. But I would say the dealing with people, talking to people, putting out fires, that was probably something that maybe came natural from being a child of divorced parents or dealing with tough shit when you're little. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know. I would imagine that probably had something to do with it. And now I think probably the main difference is, you know, meditation, when you practice regularly, you become more flexible of mind, and I think you become more stress resilient. I mean, science shows you that, but for me personally, you know, meditation allows me to have like a choice in how I want to handle things, and I think that's something I wish I would have had back then, because I think I would have been better at managing my own stress, or making even better decisions, or maybe moving slower, or whatever it is. Yeah.
When you had the health scare, did you in any way start to feel like, and I don't know what it was, but did you feel like, oh no, you know, this is what my mom went through, she had health issues?
Course.
Okay, so you started, was it a dark kind of place? Was it that?
For sure.
Oh, it was.
It was a little bit dark. You know, fortunately, it wasn't life-threatening or anything, but it was debilitating for like a short period of time. And I remember just saying to myself, like, I don't think I'm taking care of myself in the way that I need to be, or if I don't, you know, really begin to do that, it'll probably deteriorate further, and I could probably, you know, fix it now. And so, yeah, and of course, all the fears of like, this is the beginning, I'm also going to be sick eventually, and like, this is just the first sign of it.
Do you ever feel?
But I also, by the way, felt like I'm not dying, and it wasn't cancer, and so it wasn't this terminal thing. So, you know, I felt also very lucky, because I'd seen what my mom went through, and what I was experiencing was not even close to the level of intensity of what she went through. Again, not to be in comparing mine, but I think also I was very grateful that that's the thing that I was struggling with, you know, because it felt manageable.
Yeah. Did you go to, I would just say, conventional doctors as well? Or
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I went to all kinds. And I was willing to really be open to anything that could help me, you know, alleviate the pain I was experiencing.
But ultimately, Frank Lipman, did I say it right? He was the one that it really connected for you. Yeah,
he was the person, I think, on from a maintenance perspective, where I felt like, you know, ongoing support and sort of taking care of myself. I liked his approach and his philosophy. So, yeah.
And was that really your first time in terms of health and wellness goes, where you started to see that sort of approach?
Yes. Okay. I mean, I remember someone used to come to the house to do biofeedback for my mom. And I remember that there were, you know, like, I saw a lot of Western medicine, you know, in her journey, and it's amazing what it can do. But I feel, you know, for maintenance and, you know, getting to root causes and nourishing the system, I find Eastern medicine has a lot of wisdom when it comes to that stuff. So I am a fan of both, and I think they both bring different things to the table.
So this scare in meeting with Frank moved you to work with this guru.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, guru means in my tradition, remover of darkness. So, you know, I think that's a word that is tricky for a lot of people. So I would say he was one of my teachers.
One of your teachers. And so you started to become interested in a Vedic approach.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me just start by saying, when I started to get into meditation, I was curious about all kinds of meditation. And I went to a place in Iowa called I can't remember the city now, but there was a Vedic spa there that I went to. I'd seen it on Oprah. I confess.
Yeah.
And anyway,
I think a lot of people saw stuff on Oprah and like.
Yeah, but I'm a guy. I'm supposed to like not
whatever.
be watching
No.
Oprah, right? Back in the day. No, I'm just kidding. But no, so I went to there and I got to experience some of the Vedic philosophies, and it was really fascinating. When we were walking in, you said, I'd like to get some hot water, and you were explaining, some of the reasons why. So give us a little insight.
Yeah, so I also similarly was struggling with different types of meditation before I found Vedic meditation, and I really only got into Vedic meditation when I was working with my co-founder, and we were interviewing teachers for Mindful to come on board. And I met a woman named Emily Fletcher who is Eva Meditation.
Yeah.
And she sort of initiated me into that type of meditation, and ultimately it really stuck like glue for me, which is what began my love affair with it. Now 2,000 hours later, after a teacher training program, I'm a teacher in Vedic meditation. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that practice comes from the Vedas, which is a 5,000, some people say 8,000, 10,000 year old body of knowledge out of India.
Yep.
And one of the sciences out of the Vedas is Ayurveda, which I am certainly not an expert on, but has a lot to do with your constitution and your own personal wellness. And so I do like to always have a wink and a nod in my well-being to Ayurveda, because I do believe that there's a lot of wisdom in that tradition of wellness. And so I in that type of wellness, usually have a type of dosha, which is like a type. And those doshas are air, fire, and I guess I think earth and water are kind of together, so in kapha, but vata is air, pitta is fire, and kapha is an earth element or water element. Anyways, so because I have vata and pitta, fire and air, I'm those are like more my dominant doshas, so that's where I tend to
Fire and air.
Okay. Yeah. And so there are all sorts of things that come. There are all sorts of things, I guess. There are all sorts of characteristics that come along with that. Like the vata is like, feeling cold in your extremities in certain seasons. Being really flighty and airy. Fire could be like the body throwing off sweat, temperature control, getting overheated. And so in the colder months, I eat warming foods to help balance, and a lot of raw fats and hot water instead of ice water, because my body wouldn't like that temperature very much. So I would say like I am like a Ayurvedic. No, I don't know that I'd call it like a novice, but I'm certainly not a practitioner or like an expert in it.
I'm trying to remember back now. I feel like did you look at something with the hand or something to determine some things?
You can often look at like your nail beds. There's a questionnaire online that you can fill out that'll tell you exactly what kind of like dosha you are. But usually you go and a practitioner in that field will tell you what you are, and then sort of help you build some sort of understanding or course of action.
And did you train here in America, or did you do some traveling for this?
So I did so there's a difference between, becoming an Ayurvedic practitioner, which is more of like a health and wellness situation, and what I do, which is Vedic meditation. So I'm just teach, in terms of Vedas, all I teach is Vedic meditation.
I see.
And I did my training here. Typically, one would go to India, and if you have the ability to do that, that's definitely the way it should be done. Go for 3 months, go with 20 other people, with wonderful people. There's a lot of wonderful initiator training programs out there. But because I had just gotten engaged, and I had Mindful and a staff, personally for me, I didn't feel like I was at a moment in my life where it made sense to leave. And, so much about the practice is a householder practice. It's meant for people who have lives and jobs and spouses and potentially kids. And, I felt that, there was an aspect that I was still being true to the nature of the practice by doing it in my everyday life, and training as someone who is in their everyday life. And it took me longer, and it was challenging because I didn't have any peers going through it with me. I had a teacher named Theo Burkhart, who ensured, that we were always being pure around the teaching and the way I was trained. and that I met all of the requirements of anyone who goes to India and beyond. So yeah.
When you started meditation, I read that for the first 5 years or so, it was very difficult for you. What types of meditation were you trying?
I was really struggling with mindfulness, to be honest. Yeah. And, in Vedic meditation, it's a lot about effortlessness. There's no like prescribed posture. You can have your back supported. This is like an acceptable posture if that happens in the middle of the meditation. And there was an aspect of it that was just a sort of more relaxed approach overall, which I really, loved, and it really spoke to me. So I think with the mindfulness, I don't know if it was that I couldn't find the right teacher, or I was trying to do it online and I wasn't interested in necessarily signing up for a new religion and going to a religious center. I wasn't quite ready for a Vipassana retreat, which is why mindful came up. It's because I wanted an accountability structure around my practice that was similar to the way I was showing up every day for my workout and my exercise, bringing incredible teachers under one roof, an amazing community that I'm interested in. Like, for me, it was dancing next to a spot that I liked, a teacher that I looked forward to going and seeing every time, that I could see my progress with and go deeper with. And so I wanted that around my meditation practice. And the irony is, of course, not lost on me at all that I was a self-sufficient meditator before we even opened the doors to mindful, because I had met the right teacher for me and was taught the right style for me personally.
So you were, at some point, you were back in New York and you started volunteering. And you met your business partner, Lodro, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's how you guys sort of started to get to know each other and come up with this idea to do the studios. What were the circumstances around that where this idea started to pop up?
Yeah, so I was just really struggling. I was in between. I just quit my job at Synetic, realizing that the film business wasn't going to be for me, and I wanted to say yes to things that felt more aligned with what I ultimately wanted to do. And those yeses brought me to Lodro's nonprofit, which was called the Institute for Compassionate Leadership, and he was teaching millennials who wanted to make a difference in the world mindfulness and MBA leadership skills, and basically putting them back in the workforce with a coach and a mentor. And so I was helping recruit students and coordinate coaches. Lodro and I became friends, and I told him, hey, I'm really struggling when I'm at home. I want to clean my dishes. I want to get down an internet rabbit hole. I want to watch TV. I want to organize. I want to do everything but meditate. How come there's no place that I can go in the city where I can take my practice somewhere so that I'm more accountable? It's not happening in my home, and I don't want to go to a religious center. So what's my option? And he sort of said to me, there's going to be one on every corner in 10 years in every major metropolitan area.
No way.
And I was like, okay. And I was like, I feel like I would know exactly what I would want to experience. So, I could probably raise the money and tell you what it should look and feel like, design it, if you brought the teachers and the content. And so that's how it started.
And was it a longer time frame in terms of that conversation, or was that an over coffee conversation?
No, that was over coffee.
Wow.
It happened over coffee.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And about 16 months later, we opened our doors. It was like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What drew you to start volunteering at his nonprofit?
I think I needed to, and I wanted to, spend my time giving back and, supporting causes that I believed in. And I think after working in such a rigorous environment like the film business, at the time his nonprofit was about, creating a more mindful workforce in the world, and so that seemed more aligned and closer than working in film to what I ultimately wanted to do. I don't think I knew at the time. And mindful really arose from a deep personal need. I needed a space to go to, and if I had this need, then maybe 8 million other people in this New York City also had this need. And mindful was really built out of service and love, to have a space to help New Yorkers learn how to meditate, to sit with themselves, to open their hearts to themselves, and maybe they'd open their hearts to their fellow New Yorkers, and maybe it would spread beyond that. So,
how did you get introduced to him?
We were introduced by a woman named Joanne Heyman, who used to be the executive director at Urban Zen, which is Donna Karen's foundation. And she tried to hire me a couple times to work for her as an assistant. Now she has her own coaching company and consultancy firm, and she's the one who, as we say in the Jewish tradition, made the shidduch, the match. So she made the business match, and she's like, hey, I think this guy's doing something really interesting. You'd be into it. And I was.
You mentioned that he was teaching entrepreneurs that were maybe doing startups or wanted to do better things in the world, and then you said MBA at some point. What does that stand? That's not.
No,
MBA,
he was teaching like MBA skills, like things that you would learn maybe in business school, and leadership skills.
He was teaching that.
I think he had other people also teaching with him. I think there was a staff of teachers who had different expertise.
But his program did that.
But his program included that.
Okay.
So like,
it did. Interesting.
So it was this cool amalgamation of business and meditation together, and
Is it still around?
No.
No, okay.
I think the content lives online somewhere, but that's his thing, so I don't think so.
And so when you guys had this coffee, or was it a coffee, just out of curiosity? I'm always curious.
It was a tea.
It was a tea. Was it in the morning?
It was in the afternoon.
Do you remember the exact day?
Yeah, and I remember where we were sitting.
Yeah.
I think it was like July. It's either like July 24th, somewhere between July 24th and July 27th. It was here in New York City at Soho House.
And then when you left, were you just like, was your mind just racing? Were you so excited, or were you scared, or what were the emotions?
I think Lodra and I think he was like, I think I said to him, well, I don't really know how to write a business model. I've never done this before. And he was like, I don't really either. I was like, okay, so let's find someone to do it. And then about a month later, I went on a double date with my now husband, who was my new boyfriend at the time.
Oh, wow.
And his friends.
Yeah.
And his friend is married to a woman named Lauren Casson, or his best friend is married to a woman named Lauren Casson, who's the founder of The Wing, co-founder of The Wing, which is a company here in New York City. And at the time, she was working for SLT, which is a workout company here in New York. And she was thinking about striking out on her own as a consultant for boutique fitness businesses that wanted to open. And as soon as she said that, because I knew that that was the model we were looking at, I said, I'll be your first client if you give me friends and family. I have this idea. And so I brought her to meet Lodro, and she helped model out, to see if it was financially feasible to do it. And after that, we were on our way.
You're on a double date with your now husband.
Yeah.
It's like the first time.
First time we like had dinner with another couple.
And you're like scheming this business with this person.
Yeah, I was like, we're on, like, they're having their own conversation. We're having our own conversation, and it was before The Wing, and she had this particular skill set about building out spaces and knowing how to do it. Yeah. And I saw an opportunity.
Simon's your husband,
Simon,
right?
Yeah.
Have you and Simon ever talked about that, and like what he felt that day? Like you were.
No, I mean, like, I think he's like, we. It's funny. When he likes something or thinks someone is nailing something, he'll snap his fingers and point. It's like this weird thing that he does, and so he would be like. If we were talking about that day, that's probably what he would do. And anyone who watches that knows him is probably going to totally lose it when they see that I did that. He'd be like, that's probably how he feels about it. Like, yep, see what happened? So, yeah.
Was there any part of you that was hesitant, scared, felt like a phony? Like, is this for real? Am I really going to do this and talk about this? Or is it just like this fantasy thing that probably won't really actually come together?
I think everyone experiences some sort of imposter syndrome, or ideas around our own personal worthiness of whether or not I should be the one to do this, or maybe someone else. I think, at the time I was smart enough to realize that I was just a lover and practitioner of meditation, but that, I needed an expert in order to build the space with integrity. And so that was, I think one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader, as an entrepreneur, is recognize what your limitations are, and not be afraid to ask for help. And so I think that I asked for a lot of help in building Mindful. I do not get the credit at all for building a space. There were so many people along the way who sent so many emails and offered so much support, and Mindful is really a labor of love of all those people.
Did you call your dad to tell him
about what?
This idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did he say?
He was like, all right. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay.
Go for it.
Was he surprised, curious? Was he like, yeah, hey, whatever's good for you, go for it? Or
I think he was super happy that I was pouring my passion into something, that I was going to pursue my passion. That's what he did. And he's had a wonderful career as a result of that.
Yeah.
And I think he was very thrilled to see all the hard work that has gone into it, and and the passion. I think, you know, my parents had me working at 15 in a store in LA every summer, and work ethic was something they instilled in us from a very young age. And, you know, I credit them with making that a priority in my life and showing up every day and doing something with the enormous amount of privilege that I have. So that's to their credit.
And so he was not tied to you being in that business.
No, I don't think he was like psyched that I quit my job. You know, he's like, you're on such a good path. You absolutely need to be having a job. And I was like, I totally agree with you. I just want to do something I love, which is, like, to be honest, very millennial. It's very, you know, it's a common theme with my generation. People have written tons of articles on working with meaning, you know, and that being a value of my generation. And so my dad comes from a different generation. He's a baby boomer, and he had a different approach. So I think from a like conceptual, I don't know if it's conceptual is the right word, from a conditioning perspective.
Okay.
We had a different perspective on what, on maybe how to approach it. But I think, you know, he is enormously pleased, you know, with.
Did he ever say at some point anything like, how the hell are you going to make money with a meditation studio?
No, no, he didn't. I mean, other people said that, not my dad. I think he really believed that he raised someone that raised women that, you know, if they put their mind to something, they can do anything. That's how my parents raised us. And so I think he was like, just, you know, really happy and proud that not only was I pursuing my passion, but it was probably something that was going to make the city and maybe the world one day a kinder place, you know, and that I was, you know, doing something with my good fortune. Again, we go back to this. It's a really important part of my story. Like, I think, you know, I to be totally honest about my journey, like, I had all the sort of help one could ever need or want, and I'm so glad I didn't squander that opportunity or those resources or that privilege. You know, that I've made the decision to do something with it. And I think it's just the beginning. Yeah,
it is. So when you so now you're moving forward. You've talked to your dad. You've got a business partner. You decided to. Did you raise money to do it?
We raised a small round from friends and family.
Yeah. Okay. And then did you start scouting out spots?
Yeah. Actually, the Greenwich Village Studios, the first day we saw on the first space we saw on the first day we looked. Okay. And for any meditation nerds out there who are listening, the address is 10 East 8th Street, which is 108, which is one of the most mystical numbers in the Eastern traditions.
And why is that?
It's the number of beads on a mala, the number of times you say a mantra. There are many more reasons, but it's just a very meaningful number.
Did you know that at the time?
Not when I signed the lease, until I was like creating a password, and I was like, whoa. Yeah. And I called up Loder and I was like, you're never going to believe this. And he was like, whoa. And so it happened pretty quickly. And I think when we opened our doors, we thought no one was ever going to come. And we were wrong. And I'm happy we were wrong.
When you guys were trying to decide on the name, what was that like?
We were kicking around some ideas. I really liked this name, mindfulness.
Nest, okay,
but it was already trademarked.
Okay.
And so once we found that out, we had to make a pivot, and we were in a meeting we were interviewing different sort of like agencies just to help us with some of the initial launch stuff. And we were just kind of like, you know, shooting the shit. And Lodro was like, what about just like mindful with no vowels? And I was like, that's pretty good. And I was like, oh, and if you space out the letters, I was like, we can say space to breathe, like we've made space in the word. You know, it was like one of those. It was like so,
I love it.
Just like casual. And everyone kind of looked around. We're like, yeah, I think you can actually also get that trademarked, because it's not the word mindful. So I think it's trademarkable, you know,
for sure.
Which is something you need to think about when you're starting a business. You know, so in addition to all the other things, like making sure there's good content and quality teachers, you know, to protect what you're building.
Of course.
So that's another important aspect.
I wondered if there was something about just taking the vowels out. Is there? Now, upon reflection or anything, do you ever think about that?
Critics of our studio, or people who are not fans of what we do, at least in the beginning, would say they couldn't afford the vowels, which I thought was a funny joke.
Okay.
I mean, it's a medium, whether or not you get it, but you know, no, it was really just, you know, you see a lot of companies at the time, I think, that were removing vowels, and it has an aspect to it that's playful, and what we said is true. We've made space not only for you to breathe and space in your life by, you know, creating meditation practice, but we were even making space in the word. Yeah. So yeah.
And then as you started to create the experience, which I got to experience, and by the way, I just want to say I love the name, so that's why that's one of the reasons I'm asking you a bit about it, because I think it's a great name, and I love the way it looks when I look at it. In fact, I was writing it just to write it and see what that felt like.
Cool.
So I got to go to the Greenwich location and experience what it's like to be a customer there. And what was some of the ideas, some of the experience you wanted to bring to a new person like me walking in and being like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah, I think meditation can be incredibly intimidating. The idea of sitting alone with your thoughts for 30 minutes sounds scary to some of us. And so, you know, there are definitely way scarier things in the world, but I think sometimes being alone with our thoughts can be an intense experience. So we wanted to make sure that when people came to Mindful, they felt really comfortable in the space. So we know it can be an intimidating thing to start, and so by making it feel like a beautiful home, by greeting you with a warm, friendly staff. Depending on how busy the class was, we try to spend some time with you, giving you a tour of the space, showing you around, showing you what the cushions are, creating a lot of certainty around your experience so that you feel really comfortable. The brain loves certainty, so we're going to show you all the things and tell you all the things and make sure you feel really at home. And you know, we don't allow any technology past a certain point, so people have to talk to one another or just sip their tea or reflect. And I think just creating this really safe, soothing, calm environment. I mean, even the paint color on the walls is called Calm. It's a Benjamin Moore color. Even to the free tea that's always waiting for you. You know, just really creating this soothing environment so that all we really need to do is just show up and focus on your breath or, you know, contemplate that thing we're asking you to contemplate in class. So I think creating that kind of really loving, safe environment was, physical environment was important.
I experienced that, and I did like that they took us around. It did make me feel safer. And I was understanding kind of the flow better. In fact, when I walked in, for some reason I thought the meditation room was on the right, but it was actually toward the back, so that helped me kind of get my bearings. And it was very welcoming people. You know, just very kind, and I enjoyed the experience very much, and I've been meditating a long time, so the teacher, I think we were talking before, was Kevin, and he did an excellent job, and after there were some questions, and he was very gentle in the way he handled it, and it was a great experience.
Kevin's one of our head teachers, and has been with us since the beginning of the studio. And I mean, our teachers are just so unbelievably wonderful. We're so lucky they come to teach at our studio, and that, you know, these are people who have donated their lives to studying wisdom traditions, and that they offer their hearts so generously to our community is very meaningful.
The mats are great too. I just wanted to say that, but you know, a lot of people get uncomfortable sitting on those. So what are other options?
So we have back jacks, chairs. We really have something for everyone. So, you know, if like with a fitness class, if you are injured or have any sort of physical limitations, it can be hard to participate with meditation. There's not the same physical barriers to entry. So just depending on what your body needs, the teachers will work with you to find the right seat, make sure you're comfortable. I think, you know, anytime if you're able to sit, you know, in my tradition, we sit with our back supported. In some other lineages, you don't. So just your body just adjusting to that posture is always going to be a little bit uncomfortable. So we just try to make sure you're as comfortable as possible.
And so how long was it from that location where you two were deciding, let's try another location?
It's about a year. So 6 months into operating, we were on the cover of the Metropolitan section of the New York Times. And that's
not too shabby.
No, and that happened organically, and it changed, the course of our business.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Obviously, the New York Times is a very important publication, and all of a sudden we were reaching people that we weren't necessarily reaching through health and wellness blogs or things like that, or just on Instagram. And once we started to see sold out classes, we had made the promise that we were making meditation as accessible as possible. And once people could no longer access our classes or our cushions, we were like, we need to expand beyond this. So we did.
And what was the decision? Like, where did you want to go in the city? Or
we based it on where we were getting feedback through some like community member surveys. So Uptown was definitely a request. Near Midtown was also a request. So we sort of compromised on 60th between 2nd and 3rd. When we say we make meditation accessible, that means all of our studios are basically located on streets, essentially exactly where the subway lets out. So on 8th Street, you have the NRW, you have the 6th, you have the West 4th stop. You have the Christopher Street stop that's like pretty much runs the gamut, and you're walking distance from Union Square from the express trains. At the Upper East Side, the NRW and the 6th train lets out on our corner. The F train is like 3 blocks from there. And then in Williamsburg, we're on the same block as the exit of the Driggs and North 7th stop on the L. So
that was all intentional. When you looked for real estate, the subway stop is important.
Yeah. Accessibility, again, everything from, doing free classes regularly to offering classes in Spanish to, special price classes. All of that is an effort to make meditation as accessible, and that extends all the way through making sure people can physically access our studios via public transportation.
When I went to the one that I went to, I'm detail oriented, so I noticed a lot of things, and I'm so curious what these other locations are like. Were you able to change some things, do some things differently? What are they like?
Especially in our Upper East Side studio. So all of our studios are located in townhouses, which I think just adds to the home feeling of it. So we're on the 2nd floor on the Upper East Side, and when you walk in, you enter through the middle of the space. So you can go left to the lounge, or you can go right to the studio space to practice, and the front desk is in the center. What we learned in our first studio is that because you you entered, it's like a more bowling alley type configuration.
Right.
So you walk through, and in order to even get to the practice space in the back, you have to walk through the lounge area. We couldn't, the way the studio was configured, the lounge area and the main practice space share a wall. So we realized that after class, people really wanted to connect it, and they would want to hang out and chat, but we would have another class happening right after. We'd be like, sorry, would you mind keeping your voices down? And we're doing that a lot. And so we said in the next studio, like, the hang space cannot share a wall because people want to hang and they want to chat and they want to talk about their experiences. So we need to separate those things. So we were able to separate them on the Upper East Side, and then in Williamsburg, you also enter similarly, but that space, which we took over a yoga studio that had gone under and had just done a build out in the space. So it was built out beautifully by the landlord and this former operator, and it was almost entirely soundproofed. I mean, the sound quality in our Brooklyn studio is spectacular, and we were the beneficiaries of that work. And so it's also very separate. While they are sort of in that same bowling alleyway where you walk through the lounge first and then the practice space, the way the practice space is configured is it's one of our quieter studios.
And I noticed, and we were talking before, there's like a skylight in each one to bring in the light.
They just randomly all happen to have skylights, which is like an unusual thing in New York. I think it goes back to that townhouse thing, we were chatting earlier, which is that some of the ways townhouses are configured, because they were configured with either backyards or space in the back. So usually the first floor or two extends all the way to the back to hit the backside of whatever's on the other street. And then the apartments are built straight up over that front part of the building. So you end up with skylights in the back. So on the 2nd floor, we have the skylight in Upper East Side. And then because we're both in townhouses, we're ground floor or basement level in Greenwich Village, so that extends all the way back behind the building, and we have that skylight there too.
It adds such a warm feel to the space. You do not feel like you are in a city.
That's right.
It's a really nice kind of getaway that's right there in the middle. So this whole meditation studio business in general, I'll call it, it's like maybe it's becoming an industry or whatnot in the health and wellness space. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to work out its relationship to technology, right? So, at Mindful, we believe that if you have access to an in-person teacher, there's no greater substitution for one human being holding space for another human being. But if you don't have access to teachers, then apps are a great way to access content. And there are wonderful apps out there like Calm, Insight Timer, Headspace, things like that. So I think it'll be interesting, people beginning to meditate, whether they're wearing like headsets and all that stuff. I'm old school, so I'm just like the analog body and it doing its thing. Yeah. I would say that that's our philosophy. But I think the way people will continue to innovate how meditation intersects with technology, I think we'll see a lot of interesting things there. I think, though, similarly, we're all so burnt out from our technology and so addicted and reliant on it that I think that there is this post-tech thing that happens where the idea of sitting with yourself and actually not having it is what's more appealing. So I would say there, Mindful has many aspects to what it does. So we have our physical studio spaces. We're in over 150 companies around New York teaching meditation. So we do what we do in corporate environments and corporate offices.
We go into
the businesses. We also have a video channel for the 15% of our community that lives outside of New York, so people can access our wonderful teachers and our content.
By the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. And that is sort of similar to the studio experience. I think there are ways that we can even improve that and make that more similar to the studio experience. I think our future might lie in a little bit of exploratory work there. We also have a teacher training program, 5 months, 300 hours, where you can learn to teach mindfulness and compassion practices. And then last but not least, we have our nonprofit arm called Mindful Ed, where we're able to do what we do in underserved communities and schools.
Oh, that's so nice. For the teacher training, is that based on a certain platform, or have you created your own?
We created our own.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What about the emergence of these companies like there's a place called Muse, and you put this headset on. Based on your values at Mindful, your core values or your philosophies, would you experiment with those types of classes, or are you going to stay old school?
I think we're going to stay old school. I am not big into yucking other people's yums or judging how someone wants to approach their own practice. It's totally self-directed and personal. I think for us, I think we want, when people come into Mindful, I think we want them to forget about measurements and metrics and performance. And I think we want them to learn to just sit with themselves as they are. So one of the Tibetan words for meditation is gom, which means to become familiar with. So meditation helps you become familiar with all of who you are. And that's you, objectively exploring yourself and getting to know yourself. And I think that that's a very significant, very special, not easily replicated, experience. Yeah.
You have a great way of describing the importance of meditation. You call it the 3 C's.
Yeah. Wow. You really done your homework.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Explain that.
So thank you so much. So first, if you really want to meditate, you have to make the commitment to practice. That's C1, commitment. Yep. Because it is a commitment. If you want to see the benefits, you're looking at a minimum of 8 to 10 weeks, 10 minutes a day over time. That's for mindfulness practice. Increased gray matter in the brain, enhancing stress resilience, increased creativity, communication skills. There's many benefits, different types of research that's been done, decreases in depression, certain things like that. Yep. And then in order to see those benefits, there's a reason it's 8 to 10 weeks, you have to be consistent. So consistency over time, so commitment, consistency, and last but not least, cumulative. The benefits are cumulative also over time. So the more you practice, the greater the benefits you experience. And that's why I think adding one more thing into our lives, one more commitment, it can seem daunting, especially when it requires that type of consistency and you don't even begin to see the benefits until you've been that consistent, is seems like a leap for some people, and I totally get that. It was definitely a leap for me. I experienced that. But one of the most incredible things about practicing is that when you practice regularly and you begin to witness those benefits firsthand, then that's the best incentive to keep going. The consistency becomes almost a piece of cake, because you know that you're reaping those benefits. I mean, for me personally, one of my favorite benefits is choice. We have a choice in how we respond to things, and meditation gives us space between whatever's triggering us and our response to that, and that's a very powerful thing to cultivate.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I practice just for that, super skill.
Yeah, it's that moment.
It is that moment, and look like
response.
Totally.
It's
and
amazing.
I'm a human, and I don't always nail it or get it right.
Of
and
course.
I think that's also part of meditating, is realizing our own imperfection, being comfortable with that, and kind of looking at all of who we are, not just the part of ourselves that we want to be, or our idealized version of ourselves, but the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, so true. Some of the feedback I get from people who are interested, so many more people are interested in meditation nowadays, is I tried it, it's not working, I don't know if I'm doing it right, and all those sorts of things, and kind of being hard on themselves, and also looking for that something. What do you say to people when they share that with you?
Gosh.
Assuming they do.
Gosh, not much, to be honest. I certainly will offer up some things for them to consider, but I think the best way to kind of get someone to continue meditating is for them to just realize that it's a struggle for everyone. I think this idea that if you're a meditation teacher, everything is so perfect in your life, and you're so on top of your all that is not real. We're human beings, and I certainly practice to manage the all-inclusive experience that life is. I am by no means I'm wildly imperfect and have all sorts of flaws, and meditation just helps me relate to my flaws better, including even if I still have the desire to miss a meditation, or I want to act out and I'd rather hang with a friend, it doesn't happen that often anymore, or I'd rather I don't know, binge watch Game of Thrones, whatever it is that's feeling more appealing in any given moment. But I think I practice to do my part in making the world a kinder place, and my practice is extended so far beyond just being self-serving, because I think one of the things ultimately is that what I've certainly discovered is it's not that relevant if all I'm doing is meditating all day, only taking care of myself. I meditate so that I can bring the kindest, best version of who I am, and it's not going to be perfect, but it is the kindest version of myself, or the best version, or all I have to give out into the world to do what I can to make my tiny little corner of the world a better place. And that looks like taking action. It's like meditate and take action to make the world a better place, and that looks different to different people depending on what their interests and their causes are. For me, I see a lot of inequality in the world. I see Black men being shot by police every day in our country. I see 11 people being killed by an anti-Semite. I see these horrific things that are happening in our country. And, I practice so that, I can make sure I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem. Not that I'm saying I would be, but that my practice allows me to go out there and be a kinder human, and care about things and about people's lives, especially people who don't look like me or have the same advantages that I have in the world. I always think, for myself at least, on this journey, it's been helpful to me just seeing each person as who they are, not judgmentally, and whether I'm at the coffee shop and I have a choice, or the grocery market or whatever, and I'm in a rush and I'm being held up, I have a choice. And the meditation practice for me has been useful in that way. For sure.
To say, hey, you have a choice. There's humans here. They have lives too, by the way. It's not all about you, buddy.
Exactly. Sure, the choice is also about, right, how I want to respond to this person in this moment. Sure, it can be in business, or it can be in a friendship or a marriage or whatever it is, but it's also how do I want to act as a human being out there in the world? And I've recently, definitely found that not unlike beginning a meditation practice, which can be, you can experience a lot of discomfort of learning how to sit and creating the time and all that stuff, that sometimes helping, make the world a kinder place is also incredibly uncomfortable, because you're stripping yourself of your own prejudices and your own biases and the own reality of the ways, I contribute to an oppressive systems in our country just by existing, by having white skin, what that means for me, and understanding that I have an obligation as a human being to go out there and fucking do something about that. Excuse my language. But no, that's the reality of it. So
that's passion.
Yeah. So for me, I am just starting on that journey, and I have a lot to learn, and there's a lot of incredible people I'm learning from. So
as a CEO of a company, and thinking about the things I guess you need to think about when you have a business.
Yeah.
Competition. What's the market like right now? Should we expand? Should we stay local? Should we grow? Should we stay where we're at? What's our vision? What are our values? How will we treat our team members, etc.? How has that played out for you as a new entrepreneur over the last however many years?
Yeah, I would say that Mindful is really good at what we do. We have the best teachers in the city under one roof. Our content is exceptional, and we like to stay in our lane. We know what we're good at. And if we just focus on that and keep doing that, then the company will grow in its own time. Lodra and I often talk about the fact that we work for Mindful. Mindful doesn't work for us. It's its own entity, and it wants to do what it wants to do, and we're just here to help carry it out and to serve, and that's really what it's about for us.
Do you have a written vision of the future?
I think it's a tough question to ask a meditator. People love asking me that question all the time. And I'm like, didn't you do your homework? Aren't I a meditator? No, I mean, just like, we are, I think as meditators, we're very focused on the present moment, and what's occurring in this moment right now. And I think sometimes, getting all hot and bothered about what's going to happen in the future is quite antithetical to what we practice.
I see.
So I think we have some ideas, and I think it's cool to dream big, but I think, meeting the immediate needs of the time, that is what we're primarily interested in.
A good friend of mine, I'm going to share a couple of stories.
Yeah.
One is a good friend of mine.
I'm so glad for someone else to talk, please. I'm sick of hearing myself.
You're fantastic. Fantastic again. A good friend of mine. Fantastic.
Can't you hear it? Fantastic. Sorry, I can't help myself.
Self-conscious the rest of the day. I'm kidding.
I have a habit actually of just commenting on people's accents.
I like that actually.
My father-in-law has this really intense New York accent, and I joke with him all the time about it. And my husband didn't realize his dad had an accent until I started repeating words that he would say just out loud. It's kind of like a sweet little joke between all of us. So I'm sorry you're also experiencing that.
I need that.
Can't help myself.
So a good friend of mine in Chicago runs a company called Nick's Pizza and Pub, and it's in the suburbs. There's a couple locations, and it became one of the most successful, I think the most successful independent pizza restaurant in the country. Wow. It was absolutely, just doing amazing. And so we would talk a lot about, he's a very mindful person, and we would talk a lot about the future, and how do you think about the future when you're so focused on the present moment. And he had a great comment to me, which was, if you're planning for the future, you're planning for it while you're in the present moment. Yeah,
of course. So
and that really helped me.
Yeah, I think one of I don't know if it's the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi or Tom Knowles, or most of our sort of my Vedic colleagues, we often say, the present is the future in the making. The future is unfolding right now in every moment that we're in. And so, yeah, I totally vibe with that. That makes a lot of sense. The future's happening right now. Oh wait, it's right now. Oh wait, it's right now. Yeah, of course. Or we can get down this real meditative rabbit hole right now if you want.
And the mentor of mine and a friend, Ari Weinsweg, who is the co-founder of the Zingerman's Community of Business in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm not sure
they
if
own the
you've
deli?
ever heard of it. They do.
Yeah, totally.
Deli.
I've been there.
Yeah, of
it's
course.
Delicious.
Yeah, most people have heard of the deli, but it's a community of businesses that does about $60 million in sales, maybe even more now. And he's an all-time favorite sort of philosopher of business of mine and many others. And he has a process for that they use there and they teach for writing out your vision of the future as if it's today. And that clicked for me when we were doing that with our company, and including every single person in the to participate in that. And I'm curious about your viewpoint on that type of process as it relates to your business.
Yeah, I think it's fun to allow yourself to think about the future and to do exercises like that. I know I've done similar things. I went on a Lululemon immersion, which with a few other entrepreneurs and interesting individuals. Cool. And that was we did an exercise that was super similar to that. And it was actually quite emotional to do, and I was very emotionally moved. But then again, I think after that, the present moment is just so palpable that I was like, I'm not there yet. So it was like that was a great exercise. But again, I think I have this. And again, I don't know if it's because I lost my mom at a young age, or it's just like every day that I'm living and breathing is a blessing of some sort, and the future will unfold in the way that it will.
So your viewpoint is to be extremely focused in this moment as much as you can.
Yeah.
Right? And so having a vision of the future is an inspiring thing for you.
Is not? No, it definitely is.
Okay.
But I think not getting too caught up in it, like allowing it to like hover there and see it and embrace it and say hi. I can see my fantasies unfolding and like I'll allow myself. Yeah, fire in it.
I'm just
sure.
saying.
Yeah, but like I think I exactly. I think like, but for me, I don't like to let myself get too caught up in that. So I think like just having a healthy relationship to it. And by the way, there are people who believe that past, present, and future is happening all simultaneously right now in this moment, anyways. And so we are in the future or in the past. Or it's just another dream. Like who knows? We could get really existential here.
Totally.
So yeah, I think like if we were sitting here for an hour and we were just like, let's just like talk about. I would love to do that. And like, what does the future mean? And is it really happening right now? And is time probably not linear, and is it instead built vertically, and what does that mean for us, and can we get someone even smarter in the room to talk about this with us? I don't know, that kind of stuff. But I think just having a healthy relationship to it. I think a lot of us spend so much time, and I've been in this position, like worrying about the future, worrying about the past, and not really focused on right here. And I think that's kind of, here is where the balance is, and you can allow yourself to, you saw what happened to me when you asked about my sisters, about my mom. I had to like travel back to that space and brought up all these different really palpable emotions and feelings and some haziness and confusion and all that is like because I'm playing in this zone of a different time. Yeah.
And do you look at that as a good thing or not?
I go to therapy every week, like I said, so I think it's probably good. I think it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think this is just kind of, this didn't happen for me overnight, but I started to think about where I am today as it relates to what happened before in the past and how it wouldn't. Is somebody calling us? The conference call in the conference phone in WeWork. That's hilarious.
I love that you didn't answer. You were just like, Control Alt Delete, goodbye.
We have that phone at my office, so I actually know kind of how to work it. But I wouldn't be sitting here with you if it wasn't for all that stuff. However you want to define it, good, bad, in between, whatever. It was just stuff. So I just look at it. I'm so grateful for all of it, and because it all made me into something, I guess.
Right. Yeah. No, it's certainly all the things brought you to this moment in this room right here where we are, and they shaped who you are and your view. And I think, I think that's all true. And I think I'm going to be different tomorrow than I was today and 10 years from now. And I'm going to go through more heartbreak, more loss, more devastation. I know society will go through all of that. And it's all going to be a part of, who I am at that final breath, I guess.
Can we look at all those things that you just said, and then there's going to be like these really amazing moments that we'll define as
totally.
And so I'm just curious your thought on can we just look at it all as just stuff, like it's not good or bad, it just is?
I think that I think it just is sort of, yes, the overarching umbrella, but I do think that walking into a synagogue and shooting 11 people is terrible. I do think that that's bad.
Sure.
And so I do think that there are certain things in the world that are good and bad, but yes, at the end of the day, it all just is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Like I think that I think there is a way to walk through the world and be a kind human, and I think there's a way to walk through the world and be a destructive and hateful human. And going back to choice, like we have the choice.
That's right.
Yeah. And celebrate the moments of joy and celebrate your loved ones and the fact that we're living and breathing, that we get another day to see each other, and be joyful, but also take a real look at the hurt in the world and see if there's anything you can do about it, because I have a feeling there's something we could all do about it.
Yeah, there is, no doubt.
Yeah.
Well said. You've had some pretty cool mentors in your life, I feel like, or cool people that you connected. One I was reading about, is it Simone?
Yeah.
She's like a...
Simi, yeah.
Did I say
Simone,
it right?
yeah, Simone.
Yeah, okay.
Simi's her nickname.
And she's, as I got down the rabbit hole with her whole thing, she's got sort of a fitness studio.
She's a fitness studio here in New York. I've been a client of hers, or a community member of hers, for... I think July of 2012 was my first class. I know that only because I just hit my 500th class.
Oh, wow.
I'm a loyalist.
Okay.
So once I
and do they track that, or do you?
They track it.
Okay.
I'm probably close. I'm probably on my way to 650 now. I'm sorry, 550 now. But anyways, I saw that she was a female business owner who had a studio, and that people loved her community and loved her method, and she was definitely an inspiration for the model. It worked for me. Her studio was really the first place I went, which is called Body by Simone, to hold myself accountable to my exercise. It was equally as effective as it was joyful. Like I had the best time going and dancing and hanging with the other women in the class. Sometimes men join us too.
Yeah.
And I really had such an amazing time, and I was like, oh, this is what I need around my meditation practice. Something that brings this kind of joy to it as well, and this kind of accountability. Yeah.
And was she in some part encouraging for you?
Oh, very much so. Like I definitely asked her a lot of questions in the beginning. How do you do this? What about this?
Right.
And she still is someone that I call and talk to about different things that we might encounter, or just get her take on things. She is opening up her 4th studio in London.
Oh, wow.
Which is super cool. She has 2 in LA, 1 here and 1 in London. So she's going international. She also is pregnant. She just announced she's 44 and having her first baby, which is amazing.
Wow,
I'm
44.
so happy for her. I hope she doesn't mind that I just said that out loud, but she did put it on the internet to all of her 200,000 followers. So, Simi, congrats. I'm so happy for you.
Congratulations. That's so great.
Yeah, and it's just amazing to see someone, on her own path, talk about letting life unfold with surprises and highs and lows, and she's been very, very inspiring.
And then, of course, your doctor, Frank.
Yeah, Frank.
Has he been helpful?
Oh, yeah. Frank is like he's like a father to me, and I really adore him, and I love his he's not an alarmist, and I love that in a doctor. And I mean, I think sometimes, there's need for alarm, but, with me, and he's just really loving and really cares for his patients. So he's been a great sounding board, mentor, supporter.
For the business.
He's actually the first person who said to me, after Mindful opened, I went in to see him for something, and he was like, he's like, you're giving me a lot of nachas. And I don't know if you obviously know what that means. It's a Yiddish word for like pride, kind of, or joy derived from pride. It's like there's not an exact translation for it, but it means like, that it's like what you would say to a family member, your proud of or happy for, which was very, very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so he's giving you great business advice as well?
More like self-care advice.
Self-care, okay.
Yeah.
Keeps you strong as a leader.
Introducing me to people along the way, people he thinks could be interesting collaborations. I think he and I are even exploring some collaborations together.
Great.
And he's been also wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned Emily Fletcher.
Yep, Emily, who gave me my mantra. Yes, of Ziva meditation. Mm-hmm. She is an unbelievable meditation teacher, crazy knowledgeable. She's been teaching for, I think, way over a decade now. Mm-hmm. She's a brilliant, loving human. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then my next teacher in that lineage was Teo Burkhart, who trained me to be a teacher, who, was by me for those 2,000 hours, overseeing every aspect of my instruction to make sure that, everything was by the book.
Do you teach any of the classes at Mindful?
I don't teach the drop-in classes, but I just taught my first Vedic meditation 4-day course at Mindful, which was a full circle moment for me. And I do teach, Lodra trained me to teach mindfulness instruction, so I do that for certain events outside of the studio and things like that. Yeah.
But you don't go into corporate. You don't do any of that.
Not
either?
Yet.
Not yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not yet.
And so there's a plan to do so.
I've only been a teacher for 40 days. So
okay. All right.
I've only officially been a teacher for 40 days. So yeah, so
sure.
I graduated August 31st. Mm-hmm. I think that's about 40 days exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Married and graduated in the same month?
Yeah, married and graduated. I think it was the 1950s.
A different type of degree, though.
A different type of degree. But
what day did you get married on in August?
I got married on August 4th.
August 4th.
Technically, August 3rd is when we signed the ketubah because you're not supposed to sign it on Shabbat. So and we were sort of following the letter of the law on that.
So great. And okay, what else do I have to ask you? There's so much. Do you have any other mentor that I left out?
Yes, actually, I have a few women that are certainly definitely influencing a lot of what I'm interested in outside of my business. So really looking at systems of white supremacy and oppression and how I'm a part of that system, and so there are women out there like Catrice Jackson, Rachel Cargill. I have a wonderful friend named Disha Dyer who is become a bit of a mentor to me too. Mm-hmm. She was the former social secretary to the Obamas, and she works for the Ford Foundation, and she has an amazing nonprofit called Be Girl World, where she
Be Girl World.
Yeah, Be Girl World, where she takes young women of color and helps them travel and see the world, and expose them to opportunities they might not otherwise have. And so I'm really into currently learning from women of color, to be honest, and making sure that I am supporting them, amplifying their voices, and learning everything I can from them. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder what you're going to be like in 20 years.
I have no idea.
I know you don't, but I'm wondering. You don't have to wonder. I'll do it for you. But it's going to be pretty special.
Oh, thank you.
Because you're a young woman already, really, in your 30s, if you don't mind me saying. Right?
Yeah, my 30s. Yeah. I'm 34.
34.
Nope, and not shy about that.
You look a lot younger, by the way.
Thank you. It's with the makeup I forgot to put on because I forgot we were videoing this, remember?
But there's a lot of wisdom,
Thank you.
Already.
Yeah, so. But again, lifelong learner, student. I'd say my husband is maybe one of my greatest mentors. Just when you're in partnership with someone like that, the level of unconditional love and commitment, support, and loyalty, I feel so unbelievably grateful that I get to come home to him every day. And he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. So him, and also my sisters. I love my sisters. They've been mentors to me my whole life, and I just could get on to a love festival to people that have been mentors to me. I'm forgetting people who are definitely important. There's also a wonderful collection of women in the city who own businesses. We get together sometimes for dinner and chat, and they're also, anyone you call for help is a mentor in a moment. So I got a lot of them.
Do you love living in New York?
I love living in New York.
Do you think you'll ever move back to LA?
I fantasize about it.
You do?
I hear the siren song, so it's a very specific kind of call, which is that, the idea of sitting in my car for 45 minutes to do what I can do in 5 minutes in New York or less is crazy to me.
Yeah.
I do fantasize about the sunshine every day, the aspects of nature.
Yeah.
I think about what it would be like to be able to just like be outside all the time and be near my father and my stepmom, who I love very much, and my friends from growing up that are like family. And so I think about that. But man, this city is hard to kick. I really love it here. It's so efficient. It's inspiring. Yeah. It's diverse. Yeah. It's a lot goes on here. It's just like, LA is such a company town. It's such an entertainment town. And it's definitely like there are other things going on there now. But I think when I, wanted to work in the film business because my dad is a television director and such a storied career there, I came to New York to be anonymous, right? Sure. Less people would care. I could, say what I wanted at the table, and my boss's colleague wouldn't be sitting next to me. Like, you go out to LA, you have to be like, okay, if you work in the business, you'd be like, let me just check this whole restaurant first, like, you don't have to do that in the same way here in New York. People do so many different things, and it's not, it's not like, if you go to lunch, 30 people are all going to be in your industry in one place. So it's an exaggeration. I'm making sweeping generalizations about LA. Yeah. But I do, I'm a love child of Los Angeles and New York. That's what it is.
Fair enough.
That's the truth.
Have you ever been on a silent retreat?
So not a silent retreat in terms of Vipassana, but I did do a 30-day meditation retreat as part of my training, and it wasn't silent, but I was meditating for 14 hours a day. Wow. So during those 14 hours, it was silent because I was practicing. But on the breaks, I was able to talk with my teacher, talk with my business partners, check in. It was just sort of the nature of it. But I mean, alone with your thoughts with no talking for me. It's not the same as I can't speak to it because I've never been on a Vipassana retreat.
What did you think of it?
Oh, it was epic. I mean,
epic.
It was epic.
Great word.
Like, that's just like what
Where
it was.
It?
I did 2 weeks in New York City in our apartment, and then I did 2 weeks out east on Long Island.
So was it self-guided in your apartment?
Yes. So it's a certain sequence that I had to run through a set number of times per day. So it's sort of like an industrial strength version of a mantra-based practice that incorporates some other more dynamic things in it. And it's called a round. A round. So one round takes 1 hour. So the requirement was 14 rounds a day for 30 days in a row.
I see.
And so that's what I did. And it was epic. I mean, I felt it was all the things.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
There's you mentioned being alone with your thoughts for 14 hours is a great saying. I think it's Jack Kornfield says it. It has to do with not going in, being alone with your thoughts is like going into a bad neighborhood. I try to never go alone. So.
It's funny. I like that joke. I'm going to use that. I'm going to look that up and use that as a Mindful Monday on our Instagram. Thank you. And I'm going to totally shout you out.
I believe it's a Jack Kornfield.
Yeah.
But I could be
no, it's, people are always like, oh man, I have my best ideas in the shower. I want to be like, try standing in the shower for 14 hours and see what comes to you. Yeah. When you're that relaxed and that real off guard, like it all comes.
Yeah.
And so it was a profound, wonderful experience. And I mean, that's a luxurious thing to take 30 days to do something like that.
Sure.
And one day I hope I'm fortunate enough to have children and at the time I felt like it was the right time to do it while I didn't have to worry about pets or children or other people's lives in that way. Yeah.
Do you think you would ever consider coming to Detroit?
Funny. Sure. Maybe.
Why did you say funny?
Just because, I mean, I say funny, so when I laugh, sometimes I just look at the person and say funny. That was in a wedding speech about me. But mostly because Detroit's a rad city, and we'd love to bring mindful there if we're fortunate enough to expand beyond New York. But I love that you picked your own town. You didn't say are you planning to bring mindful beyond New York? You're like, Detroit. That's what was funny. It was like very one-pointed.
Oh, okay.
But Detroit is a cool city. I feel like rent is probably more affordable than it is here in New York. I don't know. For sure. Yeah. And I think the question for us and our expansion is about finding the right teachers, and not just the right teachers, that's what I mean, but the amount of teachers to actually have a full studio around. So I wouldn't rule it out. You never know.
And, given some of my visions for your future, I think what you're doing and some of the ways you're thinking is very relevant to our city in Detroit, because we've had such a challenge between races. It goes back many years, and it's deep-rooted back to the riots in Detroit. And there's a whole generation now that still is younger now, but their families and their parents and their grandparents remember those times. And now Detroit is emerging, and it's starting to come back together. And it's a really wonderful thing for someone like me who's been there for many years. And quite frankly, when I was young, going downtown was not something that we would even be encouraged to do. And now people are moving downtown,
of course.
And it's really wonderful. So your ways of thinking would be welcomed in our city. So
I hope my ways of thinking would be welcomed everywhere.
I think they will. I think they will.
Just
but I'm being selfish. I'm just thinking about Detroit right now.
I think that there's a lot of healing that can happen, through this practice, but I also, like I said at the top, it's healing and it's meditation and it's also action. And I think, to be totally transparent, I think I definitely went through a phase where I thought that my own consciousness and my own healing is like where it stopped. And I think that's the evolution that you get to. You begin to realize that it's not just about that. In some ways, I think sometimes that's a part of the process of like retracting and retreating and having some aspect of your practice feel at all, reclusive or whatever. You remove yourself out of it, but then it's like, oh, the whole reason I do this is to actually go out there and live in it and to do it and to, participate.
That is such a wonderful statement, really, and a leadership statement on so many levels. Really it is, and it's inspiring to people like myself who have been in business for a long time, and I think young people that are starting out in business as a way to look at things a little bit differently. And so please know that if you ever do come to Detroit, you have a friend.
Thank you. I'll definitely reach out.
But even if you don't, you have a friend.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to Patricia Karpus for connecting us.
Thank you, Patricia.
She's a special person to me.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing your life with us.
Oh, yeah.
I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing me on the highs and the lows. Thank you. It was so lovely, and I'm very grateful and feel lucky that I get to tell my story. Yeah.
The world will benefit from it for sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
Anyways,
thank you. Yeah, thank you.